to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a weekly show that goes out over YouTube and all of the major podcast platforms. And each week I sit down with an inspiring person and listen to them tell their story and share it with all of you. This week was no different. I was lucky enough to meet with Bruce Daisley. Bruce is the VP of Twitter here in Europe. He's also the best-selling author of The Joy of Work. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. And he's got his own podcast show, which is the biggest podcast, in fact, business podcast in the UK, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat. Very interesting stuff, so if you haven't listened to that, I do recommend that. He did the talk at Google, so you'll see a slightly different setup in front of a live audience with questions from the audience, and Bruce was kind enough to give me permission to share this with all of you. Please enjoy. Hello, good afternoon. It is afternoon, isn't it? Good to see you're all taking some time out for lunch, which is one of the topics that we'll no doubt get to. I'm super excited to welcome our guest today. I know most of you in the audience. My name's Craig Fenton. I lead strategy and operations for the UK and Ireland. And I also have the privilege of leading wellbeing for strategy and operations, GTM, for EMEA. So that's the hat I'm wearing today and the context for our speaker. And I know this is a subject close to many of our hearts. I'll give Bruce a quick introduction. He insisted I wasn't too extensive on this. So Bruce is the VP EMEA for Twitter. He grew up in a council estate in Birmingham and paid his way through university working in fast food chains, and since then has had an absolutely meteoric and impressive rise in the industry. He's the best-selling author of The Joy of Work. Anyone read it? I've read it, yeah. Okay, so a few more copies, Bruce. We'll get sold today. It's a great read. If you haven't read it, do read it. #1 bestseller in the Times, and just some really interesting, resonant tips about how to make work more enjoyable. He's also got the UK's #1 podcast, which is called Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat. He spent the 90s selling mostly radio time back in the day in the 90s. He spent a long time at EMAP. Then he led YouTube and display at Google. So we're welcoming Bruce back now at Twitter, where he's been for the last 7 years. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to Bruce Daisley.
Thank you. How you doing?
Welcome, Bruce. So
what I will say is the book is just 6 copies behind the #1 best-selling business book of the year, which is a book by a guy called Patrick Lencioni, who hasn't bothered to come here as far as I know. So I'm just saying that, you know, and everyone loves an underdog.
So for this day only, please feel free to get your phones out.
Spence it.
Yeah. Well. Thank you. Okay, so we're here to talk about well-being and what it means to each of us and get your wisdom on the matter. Let's level set to start with. What does well-being mean to you, Bruce?
I'll start by saying what it doesn't mean, because I find that kind of easier, because I think people's mental state is so complex and nuanced. But I think that what we're starting to experience in work right now is this paradox where people have a lot of benefits and perks and a lot of things afforded to them, and yet simultaneously they feel burnt out, and by some measures about half of British office workers feel burnt out, but also people feel an absence of control. They feel like they're not able to actually make any meaningful contribution, and it produces this dissonance. A friend of mine is a London Business School professor, and he's spent some time looking at how people work, and he said, you know, you look at the banking sector, for point of sort of moving it on, where people get extraordinarily well paid and they have incredible perks and incredible benefits, but the levels of depression, anxiety and health-related illness are massive. So it's this extraordinary thing where everything that you might be expected to be delighted about seems to be there, and it's causing a problem for people. It's causing an issue where people feel, it's sometimes called affluenza, right? Where you feel like you've got all this material wealth, but you feel emotionally, spiritually impoverished. And I think that's one of the challenges right now of modern work, that a lot of people feel, I should have nothing to complain about, but I just don't feel okay.
So fixing that dissonance.
I think that's a big focus for me. So specifically, I work at Twitter, and it's interesting. We have like the life of a mayfly, in the sense that it goes up and down and up and down, and it's sort of it's fascinating to watch, I'm sure, from the outside, but it can be like quite an experience from the inside. But it means when we've had bad times at Twitter. And it's delightful, I adore working there. But when we've had bad times, I've witnessed in some of my colleagues just a sense of real confusion, because they feel emotionally engaged with the place, but just feel like they can't keep doing it. And probably one of the biggest votes of no confidence you can ever have is when someone quits with no job to go to, when people feel, I'm not sure I can carry on doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me what the impetus for the book was, because it's really sort of raced away, hasn't it? And where did it come from? Where did the idea come from?
Well, obviously, it's the second best-selling business book of the year, and
number one after this, right?
What it came from was a process of learning and discovery. So I found myself in a situation where, when people had first joined the London Twitter office, it was about a third of the size of this room. It was a tiny little place. And there was no doubt it was one of the most enjoyable environments I've worked in. I have to say, when I worked in the YouTube team here, that was quite a buzz as well. So we had a really good environment, and then something went wrong. And I think because I'd low-key taken credit for when times had been good, I thought I need to take responsibility for why times are bad. And probably what we often find ourselves doing when we're trying to change anything is we end up adding more to it. To give you an example, I met someone from a charity that said to me, we're trying to fix our culture. And so to do it, we put a 3-hour meeting in everyone's diary. No one turned up for the 3-hour meeting. And it's because our instinct is always to think, let's put something extra in, let's add a meeting, let's do something. And I think, my interest was, what can I actually do to make people's lives better? And then I sort of started doing this podcast, and what I discovered very quickly is that you meet a lot of bosses who will tell you the story, the narrative of how they fix their work. And then you'll meet people like the London Business School professor or people who've done research into it, and the answers are completely different. So you have to pick a side. Do I pick Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, who says the secret of success for Netflix is we're a team, not a family? Or do I pick Sigal Barside, who's a professor at Wharton, who says the most important thing in good teams is they feel a familial love between them? And so you've got to pick. You can't have both.
So which side are you on?
So I'm very strongly on the side of the people who do the research, right. The people who do the evidence. And, if you search, a good place to start would be to search Netflix on Glassdoor. And you read some, people say it's the Hunger Games with better food. It's just interesting to see those things. And then I start thinking, wow, so there's all this research done by incredible people, but none of it is reaching people in jobs. So you might not be a manager, or you might not be a boss, but you dream one day of, how would I run this team? And then you read some of this and you're like, wow, this is extraordinary. And so that was my feeling. My feeling was there were a lot of things that any of us could do to improve work, but it's no one's fault that none of that evidence is reaching the average 25-year-old worker, the average 32-year-old boss. None of it's reaching people.
So it's up to us, in a way.
Just my feeling was, if you package some of this research into a way that anyone could bring to their team meeting and say, look, I just thought we might want to try to do team meetings a bit more like this, or I wonder if we could consider this for the next time we think about our team culture, and try and package it in a way that people can sort of bring it along to start a discussion. Right. It might help facilitate that.
Well, very grateful for you all to add this meeting to the diary today for wellbeing. I'm going to ask you a challenging question. So you work at Twitter, I work at Google. In a way, our business is to pump information out in some way, and entertainment and this sort of stuff. And the information is almost overwhelming sometimes. Do you feel a paradox between what you advocate in wellbeing on the one hand and the organisation you work with? And I reflect that on myself as well, because it's something that I think about.
Personally, I don't. To give you in context, the average Twitter user uses Twitter for about 10 minutes a day. So it's not this thing where it doesn't compete, for example, with the average time that most people spend watching TV. So it's pretty small. In fact, broadly, I would say it's about the same amount of time that people read a magazine or newspapers a day. So it's pretty small, but I recognise there are some people who use it more than that. I've been really inspired. There's a really interesting guy at Georgetown University, a guy called Cal Newport, I like him because he's a subversive thinker who thinks in a different way to a lot of other people. So he's doing a book right now called A World Without Email. Interesting, right? He specifically mentioned Google to me. He said, if I hired the best engineers in the world and I was paying them loads of money, the last thing I would do is give them a personal email account. Right, and irrespective of what you think of that, as a thought experiment, what an interesting thought experiment. What would it look like if you didn't give them a personal email account? Maybe you give them a group email account with notifications and updates. We don't give them a personal one. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought experiment. But he wrote a book this year called Digital Minimalism. And I guess his point of that book was that he said to people, we often use digital products without being clear of our intention of how we're using them. It's very easy to fill an idle moment by going onto your phone.
Yeah.
Very easy. We're all guilty of it. And he said, he's not saying that we don't do those things, but we try and be a bit more intentional about why we're doing them.
Right.
So, YouTube, for example, I'm the biggest fan of YouTube in the world. I absolutely adore it. It was the greatest honour to work on it. And I think, it's such a force for good in so many ways. But if you're clear about what you're going onto YouTube to do, I think you can get more benefit than or TV or Twitter or anything. Yeah. And so just being a bit intentional about what we're aiming to use our time for, I think probably is good advice for anyone.
Going there to learn something rather than sort of idly graze.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's a great idea. I want to latch on to this point around email. I find your provocation very, very stimulating because I think about this deeply. Like most people in this room, I probably get 150 emails a day. Not all of them are very relevant. And I often wonder what the world would be like without email. By the way, anyone in favour of losing email completely? No, it's 50% of the room.
There's a really interesting thing.
What if?
There's an anthropologist. He started off by studying monkeys, a guy called Robin Dunbar. Do you know Dunbar's number? Let me talk you through it. So Robin Dunbar did this really interesting piece of work where he looked at the cognitive capacity of monkeys, actually. Monkeys spend about 4 hours a day. Here we go. Monkeys spend about 4 hours a day grooming each other. So sitting 4 hours a day, this is about 40% of their waking time, 4 hours a day just picking the fleas off each other. Now, if it was related to the amount of fleas they had, then long-haired monkeys would require more grooming than short-haired monkeys, but it's the same. And he couldn't understand what was influencing it. Also, in addition, there seemed to be something where different groups of monkeys would groom more or less different numbers of monkeys. Anyway, he discovered it's directly related to the size of the brain and a specific part of the brain. But so he was really interested. So monkeys will groom about between 15, 20 monkeys. You never get a group of chimpanzees bigger than 13 males. There seemed to be something in that. He plotted it to see how many, based on brain size, how many humans would hang around with, how many that they would associate with. So grooming is a very intimate activity. And he came up with this number, 150. It was very much a thought experiment. What would that mean? He started looking for the occurrence of 150 in human civilization. And it appears everywhere. It appears in troop numbers, in military battalions going through time. It's the average village size in the Doomsday Book. It's the average tribe size in sort of ancient civilizations. It occurs time and time again. And he called this, or someone else called it, Dunbars number. The idea that we're only able to form trusting relationships with 150 other people. That's the notion of Dunbar's number. The first thing that occurs when you talk about Dunbar's number, people say, I've got 1,000 Facebook friends, or I've got 700 Facebook friends. But what he says is that you've got to be really clear. Dunbar's number is people that you would do a favour for, people that you've got some sort of skin in the game. And so I think we all know that there's certain people, if you saw them out in a bar tonight, you'd duck down and you'd try and avoid being spotted. You know, there's not always a trusting relationship. But the interesting thing is that we've created modern organisations where we breach that number, where we're expected to stay in touch with lots of people, to be in meetings with hundreds of people, and to be on email chains with hundreds of people. And I think what it's doing is it's creating this cognitive burden where we just feel overwhelmed. Now, Robin Dunbar said the apes were spending 40% of their time doing this. The average Brit spends about 2 days a week, so about 40% of their working time in meetings. And I think just what we've done is we've created organisations that are potentially too big for what humans can deal with. Right. So, you know, for me, it starts becoming a really interesting exercise in, could you make meetings smaller? Could you make teams smaller? Could you stop reducing the amount of dependencies on other people? Because I think we'd find it more satisfying.
Minimum viable product. I assume you use email at Twitter, do you?
Yeah, we do.
What protocols, if any, do you have around it?
I mean, we've got a very well-established norm now that we don't do weekend emails. And I think that's come about by our CEO is he would never be that sort of person. But there's probably the people the layer below him who historically might have been weekend emailers. And I think we've learnt through experience that when we had those high levels of burnout, that we were forced to ask ourselves, what are we doing that probably is unsustainable? So now if someone emails at a weekend, and occasionally senior new starters will come in and email at the weekend, certainly other senior people will email them saying, can you not do weekend emails, please?
Yeah. That's really encouraging, and it's one of the principles in the Wellbeing Charter that's just been released, by the way, so good to see we're on the right track.
But the important thing on that is that if someone senior, some hotshot Android person, someone from the ads business, it's down to everyone to politely email them saying, hey, we've collectively agreed not to email at the weekend. I wonder if you could respect that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I came from a culture actually pre-Google that was always on, and I think it's a corporate choice. I completely agree, but it needs to be.
And what happens with it is people get burnt out. Yeah. There's really interesting evidence. We can sort of see an A/B test. The banking industry still has very long working weeks, and so what you observe there is 120-hour work weeks. So that's sometimes they call it sort of the taxi turnaround, because a taxi will drop you off at sort of 6 a.m. at home so you can have a shower, put new clothes on and go back to work. But what you observe in those environments is the levels of anxiety and depression are off the charts. The levels of depression, skin problems, in one case cancer. You observe that people just get close to break down really quickly. There's also something that you can observe. Junior doctors, so people who work very long hours in junior doctors, you can measure how people age by the length of their telomere, something related to DNA. It's how long the DNA chain is in their DNA. Junior doctors age 5 times faster than their peer group peers. So working long hours literally kills you.
Well, so there's another paradox, right? Junior doctors and sleep. And sleep is actually one of the topics you talk about. We've had Matthew Walker, who wrote Why We Sleep here. What's your point of view on the sleep point?
I mean, look, that book is just wonderful. It's just, as a collection of all the evidence on sleep, it's amazing. The interesting thing for me is I hope work goes on a journey like sleep has done, because it used to be, and maybe when you're at college, or maybe you've worked for a boss who claims not to need more than 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. And what's happened over the last few years is that just evidence has turned up and said that's an opinion, but it's not fact. Yeah. So we used to have a lot of people who would model this idea that success was working till 1 a.m., then getting up and starting it all over again. my favourite bit of evidence on that is that the biggest piece of work ever conducted into people who claim to not need a lot of sleep was done where they're invited in to have their brain scanned. Because actually there was a genuine curiosity. Did some people have a brain that didn't need a lot of sleep? And the biggest group of these people ever gathered was drawn in to have their brains put through an fMRI brain scanner. 3/4 of the people who claimed to only need 5 hours sleep a night fell asleep in the machine. And so I think the conclusion was that we often paint a story that suits what we want it to believe, but unfortunately that's not backed up by the facts. So if work goes on that same journey, because only a few months ago Elon Musk was on TV saying for him success is working 120 hours a week.
More than the competition.
Absolutely. Right. Gary Vaynerchuk very famously sort of espouses this hustle culture. Gary V, a big voice in what people are trying to aspire to reach success. He will talk about, it's working 17 hours a day. And unfortunately, those people are modelling a pattern of behaviour that all of the evidence says leads to burnout, breakdown and illness.
And there's some pretty famous characters other than those ones. Churchill and Thatcher and Reagan, all of them were famously light sleepers.
Although Churchill used to get up at 11 a.m. Right. And he used to, famously, if you read anything about Churchill's pattern of behaviour, I don't think it'd survive modern tabloid media. But Churchill used to stay up late into the night, drink champagne all day. He'd have an afternoon nap for 2 hours every afternoon, and then he wouldn't get up till late in the morning. So, these days I don't think it would look if you said to people, I'm not going to be in till 12 because I'm not getting up till 11, I'm not sure he'd cut it in a modern office.
Sounds like a very balanced diet, to be fair. Yeah, and actually some of them who are famously underslept developed neurological conditions, which is
Thatcher and Reagan both died of degenerative brain disease.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce, we work in an open plan environment. This is very common today. You've got a very interesting point of view on open plan environments. Any tips for us on and how we conduct ourselves in that sort of setup?
I mean, look, open plan is it's sort of a triumph of aesthetics over evidence. And so what you normally find is that people report things, first-hand accounts, is they might say, I work in this beautiful environment, and no doubt, you guys have got extraordinarily beautiful environment, but they'll often say, I can't get anything done. My work experience is that I'm constantly beset with interruptions. And I think that's one of the realities of modern work for a lot of people. They feel that they either put headphones on to cope with it, or they want to work from home, or they go and grab their laptop and sit in a corner. I chatted to a lot of people. WeWork have had a bad month, haven't they? But I chatted to people who work in WeWorks. And the most popular part in WeWorks is people not sitting at their allocated workstation, but going to sit anonymously behind plants, or going to sit in a sort of like... Why? Because people just they don't mind the aesthetics of where they work, but they just don't want to be interrupted. Right. And so I think that's the challenge. There was a really interesting piece of work done a few years ago, and it's often repeated, called the Computing War Games. It's a really interesting experiment where they take 500 developers in teams of 2, and they give them a medium-sized problem that they've got to solve, and they can use any computing language, and all they're told is you've got to work in the way that you normally work. That's the only thing. And what they discovered was that you can't correlate the results with the amount of experience that people have got. You can't correlate the results with the program they use. You can't correlate the results with the seniority of the people. The only thing that correlates with the success, and the best results are 10 times better than the worst results. The only thing that correlates with success is how private people's working conditions were. People who said they were constantly interrupted were right at the bottom. People who said that their working environment was acceptably private were right at the top. That's it. So then it's extraordinary, based on that we optimise work for aesthetics rather than people getting things done.
Or costs per square foot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've developed this little protocol in the team where you can shut the metaphorical office door by putting the headcans on.
Yeah. But I chatted to the guy who's building the landscraper, the new Google building at King's Cross. And I was just really inspired because he's probably the number one architect in the world, a guy called Bjarke Ingels, incredibly sort of inspiring rock star, handsome Danish guy. And And he talked to me about his thinking when he's designing that building. And he said, we've noticed people struggle to work in teams of more than 100. And that's interesting because that correlates with what we just talked about before, right? He said, when you look at historically high productivity environments, they seem to be where people are enabled and empowered to separate themselves from other teams a little bit, to maybe create their own spaces. There's this really interesting building called Building 20 at MIT. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT Building 20. I think it's Building 20 because its number is confusing. I think it's Building 20. Produced 9 Nobel Prize winning physicists in 12 years. Unbelievable. And so they went and they said, what is it about this environment? It was horrible prefabricated, like a porta cabin. It was had mice, it had wooden ceilings that leaked. The only thing that was particular about it was that because it was so rough and ready, people would turn up at the weekend and put a wall up. People would turn up and they'd say, I'm not having that. And they'd just put some wood separating them from other people, or they'd turn their team into 8 people that are just together. And so Bjarke Ingels said, that's our inspiration. When we're creating the Landscraper, when we're creating the new Googleplex, our inspiration is how can people adapt and build their own environments.
So
that sounds pretty good.
give everyone walls to put up. Fantastic. Start moving the furniture around.
Because that's the illusion of Openplan. The illusion of Openplan is everyone thinks, oh yeah, what's going to happen is we're all going to be in like this open space where people are jamming ideas with each other. That's not what happens. People wander over and say, can you keep your volume down on that phone call?
Well, that kind of takes us into how people come together when they have something to discuss. So we talked a little bit earlier about meetings. Give us your tips on meetings or your observations.
The meetings are a symptom of the problem rather than the cause of the problem, but they're a really exhausting symptom of the problem. I always think this, is that if there was like a Freaky Friday of your life where a child's transplanted into your brain, they would observe pretty quickly how much time you spend in meetings, and then pretty quickly after that how little attention you spend in those meetings, right? How little attention you actually give to what's going on. We are almost in this sort of pantomime of I'm present, I'm paying literally no attention, don't ask me anything. In fact, one of the things that's most terrifying is when it goes quiet and someone says any questions and they say your name. It's like, right, I'm going to have to pretend to be paying attention. But there's a strange paradox, which is I always think the fear of missing out has been supplanted by FOMO has been supplanted by FOMO, which is the fear of missing out on the meetings. Because if everyone around you gets up and goes to a meeting, we immediately have this sense that we've been rejected. Like, why aren't I in this meeting? What's happening in that meeting? Can I come to the meeting? So like we've got this strange thing that the meetings we're in, we don't pay any attention in, but then we want to be in all the other meetings we're not in. And it creates this burden on us. It creates this sort of this gravitational effect on us, on our energy. There's this strange thing when people are required to perform self-control. It's exhausting. It's cognitive and mentally exhausting. Yeah. If you have to sit silently in a meeting all day, it's difficult to explain why you go home exhausted, right? All I've done is sat somewhere, but you go home mentally exhausted by having had that burden on you.
You're exercising some. I remember in the certainly in the noughties, when conference calls were all the rage, right? You had 15 people on conference calls, and you'd ask a question, and somebody had come off. There'd be a pause, and then the person called on would come off mute and say, "Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was on mute." No, but you were on mute. You weren't. Basically, they weren't listening. So
we've started doing a lot. I chatted to a guy who was like a world expert on meetings, and I thought we're doing better stuff than that. But at Twitter, we do a lot of silent meetings. So using Google Docs, the way that this works is
silent meetings.
It uses just Google Docs.
Okay.
But they're silent meetings. So you turn up at a meeting, it's calendared for an hour or whatever. Everyone reads the Google Doc together, annotates it, adds comments, and then normally that takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then at 20 minutes, you need someone who runs the meeting. But so the person running the meeting will say, okay, feels to me like there's a lot of comments on these two themes. Then you spend about 20 minutes talking about those themes. Normally meetings run a lot quicker, they're way more satisfying, and you get more done in them. So probably the majority of decision making and leadership meetings. We're doing our 2020 plan tomorrow. It's a silent meeting. So by silent meeting, half the meeting is totally silent, half the meeting is conversation. And
wow.
so that's become sort of the norm at Twitter.
I'm playing that movie through my head and wondering how that would work here. Interesting idea.
But how would it not work?
To try.
So here's the thing. Number one, so Jeff Bezos observed this.
I'm getting free coach.
Jeff Bezos observed this, is that slideware, whether it's Google Docs slides or whether it's PowerPoint, slideware, it creates a burden that's unrealistic. Most people don't pre-read the pre-read. Right. Why? Because we're in meetings. When we're going to read it? Okay, then, so he said, we're not going to do any slides at all. Slides, they optimize work towards extroverts. They optimize work towards men, because men blag their way more than women, based on evidence. And men talk about things that they know nothing about more comfortably than women, based on evidence. And so Jeff Bezos said, we only have meetings when there's a document. You prepare a document, then you call the meeting, and a meeting is a decision.
Yeah.
We've evolved that to we use Google Docs for our weekly meeting. So say if you've got a weekly update that everyone needs to do, everyone puts 2 lines in there. Everyone comments on that. You tend to get a far better exchange of information. I'm not sure how it wouldn't work. The thing I'll say, one of my colleagues is probably the best advocate for it. He's written something called the Silent Meeting Manifesto, which is, if you're interested in that, you'll find his Medium post. And he talks through it. He's done a podcast with me talking through it. And he's done meetings up to 100 people using that format.
Really? Okay.
And he says what tends to happen is people's satisfaction with meeting goes up massively. And it just changes the dynamic of the meeting. Because you realise pretty quickly we don't need this meeting as often.
Right.
Or this meeting feels like it can be different. So we're doing our it spreads like a virus across our company, really.
You got me, Bruce.
Have a go, man.
I'm going to try it.
Have a go.
Try it. Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'll report back. Listen, I want to ask you something which is sort of not specifically related to well-being, but kind of is. You've got an incredibly busy and senior job. You're leading an organisation across EMEA. You've got a podcast. You're an author, and I'm sure there's a stack of other things that I could list out that you're also doing. It's a question from the heart. I've just started my own YouTube channel and podcast myself. How do you find the time?
I see the podcast as my hobby rather than work. I think that's an important qualification. So, I was traveling somewhere yesterday. I spent most of the day reading, most of the time that was like sitting around reading something that I'm fascinated and passionate about, and I was captivated by, and that was sort of late into the evening yesterday. So I see that as more of a hobby than, and actually I find it gives me more passion and energy for my job to do that. But yeah, there are times when there are bottlenecks where it becomes a little bit too much. I think if you ask my partner, there's times where I look like I'll probably take on a bit too much. But I've enjoyed having something that's a distraction from work. There's an interesting thing where over the last few years, work has replaced identity a bit. So you might recognise a bit of this, that people used to have hobbies. They used to be passionate about things, turn up with their mates and they'd say, whether they were in a band or whether they did something that they were dedicated to, and work has replaced that for a lot of us. Work is now our identity, and I think it's unhealthy. It's not only unhealthy for us, I think it's unhealthy for just mental well-being as much as anything else.
Well, you see more, don't you, of the side hustle that's going on, which is kind of a hobby. It's a hobby that's sort of serious in some way. Do you see that as important?
Absolutely, but I would say that the people who get the most nourishment from that are the people who dedicate time to it.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get to the end of a week and think, I've spent 0 hours on my side hustle. I've given all of my best attention to my job.
Yeah.
And I think it's about, if you are going to have that, try and dedicate your time to it.
Yeah. Well, you've given me some really good tips already. By the way, are those 6 books purchased? Yes, one over here.
Come on.
Any others? Get on the phone, get the book. It's really worth a read. Feel like your agent.
I know, I haven't got one.
You talk about creativity a lot. this is a topic that's, I think, increasingly important, because creativity in a way is the last and most exciting human frontier in a world where we're able to lean on machines more and more and more. Talk to me about your point of view on creativity and how we can foster that in the work environment.
There's a real strange thing that you start observing a lot of people saying, and it's only when you look out for it you notice it. But people say, I had so many good ideas on holiday. And there's a reason for that. And I came here about 3 months ago, and I think I said this specifically then, but I'll try and sort of say it for people. But if you were to do like a rudimentary 15-minute YouTube clip of how the brain works, one of the things that you'd find is that these 3 systems of cognition, and to be honest, the more neuroscientists you chat to, they sometimes name them different names, whatever. Neuroscience is a really interesting science because brain scanning has only really existed for 20 years. Before that, they used to test things on animals, a lot of animals. I used to be like animal activist, and now I spend all day reading about how monkeys are having their brains damaged. And wars. Neuroscience used to advance during wars. Why? Because so many people got brain injuries, they could observe that people's behaviour changed from this brain injury. And so they learned, that part of the brain must be related to that. Anyway, now if you look at the brain, there's broadly 3 systems that run how cognition works. The first one is called the executive attention network. So that's you on your phone typing a text to someone. Second one is called the salience network. So while you're on your phone typing a text to someone, the salience network is making sure that the road you're walking across is safe and no cars are going to hit you. So those work in conjunction with each other. That's why you can feel like you can walk down the road texting and you feel you're safe, because the salience network is sort of acting as your force field. And the third one is called the default mode. And the default mode is, because brain scanning is 20 years old, or relatively sophisticated brain scanning is 20 years old, they've struggled to see what it was doing initially. And they observed that the default mode it's often activated when you do something and then you stop doing it. But here's the remarkable thing, is that if you say to people, when did you have that idea? The situations they describe are when they would be in the default mode. So if you've ever had a good idea when you're coming up the escalator on the tube, or you've had a good idea, someone said to me, I have all my ideas when I'm sitting and staring out the window of planes, trains, whatever. Good ideas come to me. My favourite example, this is the one I mentioned, was that a guy called Aaron Sorkin. He wrote Moneyball, he wrote the Social Network film, he wrote The West Wing. He realised he was having all his best ideas in the shower. So he had a shower installed in the corner of his office, and he says he has 8 to 10 showers a day. And but it's just a good reminder, because the default mode is sort of like our screensaver. It's sort of like our boredom mode. But we've come to this conclusion, and in a world obsessed with hustle and productivity, we've come to this conclusion that we can't allow a moment of our time to be unproductive. If we go to bed and a moment of our time has been unproductive, then we've wasted a day, and other people might have advanced beyond us. Until you look at the sort of genesis of ideas, and ideas don't come from constant perpetual busyness, they come from moments of our brain giving, sort of allowing these ideas to ferment. Hence why people say, I went on a holiday and I had 3 really good ideas. I went on holiday, I had an idea for a business. I went on holiday, I had an idea for an app. I went on holiday, I had an idea for a book. Why? Because our brain, without this constant extra stimulus going in, is finally being allowed to connect things. So I think, being really clear about those things, then you start looking. There used to be an old truism, which was beware the busy manager. And it was true, because if someone is constantly busy, then there's no gap for cognition. They don't come up with clever new ideas. They don't think, how about? Yeah. And I think the more that we can be aware of that, it's why I worry that when people like Elon Musk model 120-hour work week, people think, my secret is I need to be productive all the time. Yeah. So I need to be drinking bulletproof coffee. I need to be, getting up at 5 to get to the gym. I need to be living Marky Mark schedule. I don't know if you saw Marky Mark's schedule, where he gets up at 3, goes to the gym. It doesn't look like a happy life. But I need to be living this overly scheduled life. And the interesting thing is, if you look at creative people, they generally don't do that. So there's actually a really nice series of books that you can buy that looks at the daily routines of creative people. And quite often, whether it's J.K. Rowling, whether it's Charles Dickens, quite often they sort of do 4 or 5 hours of intense work in the morning with no interruption, with sort of no distraction, and then that's it.
Really focused work.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Done for the day.
And you've got to schedule the space for it, right? I schedule 3 hours a week to meet with myself. Probably the most boring meetings I have all week. But and sometimes I stick to it and sometimes I don't. But it's just to do that. It's to create that space to sort of think. It really resonates. I'm going to ask people to step up to the microphone if you've got a question in a moment. So that's your 30-second warning. As you're assembling your thoughts. Differences, Bruce, between Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, do you see any? Is there any relevant difference in the treatment that we should apply to those different age groups?
I'm cautious of those things. While I think, there are superficial things about the use of technology, I'm cautious about those things. I think quite often it's very difficult sometimes to separate hierarchy from age. Every generation has always thought that the generation that came afterwards was somehow trying to undermine society and should be destroyed. And I think, that's what generally happens now. I'm a very strong advocate of headphones, but you'll often get bosses and, maybe they've got their own office or they've got an EA, an assistant sitting in front of them protecting them, but the bosses will say, it's a shame everyone's got headphones on. And they'll make a comment that doesn't reflect the way that work is just very different. Yeah. So I'm cautious of those things, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. We've got a question here.
Hello. So you've talked about getting
busy.
What's your name? My name is Sarah. You've talked about being busy all the time or having things to do all the time. Isn't there another side where procrastinating all the time, like people are between meetings, emails, checking their phone, where, how do we handle procrastination? How do we stop ourselves?
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily call that procrastination. I would call that switching time. So there's a really interesting thing called attention residue. That if we switch our attention between two things, it seems that we don't focus on either of them. It's why if you're reading a document and then you just check your texts, you don't immediately feel as connected to the document as you previously are. Now, the evidence suggests that attention residue of switching it's between 7 and 20 minutes. So that's what I would say personally. I would say that sometimes that sense of procrastination comes from we've started something, we go into something else, we come back, and the sort of the drive that we had to get it done suddenly is dissipated because we're no longer focused on it. Personally, I feel that the realities of modern communication are such that we can't necessarily beat ourselves up too much on this, but the evidence really strongly seems to be if you dedicate your attention to one thing and then another, you get both done far quicker. So I chatted to one guy who just said to me, all he aims to do is he writes down his most important thing every morning. And he doesn't do anything, he doesn't open his email until he does his most important thing. And as a simple productivity tool, it's actually quite effective. It's just what you realise is that presentation you've been putting off writing for ages just required 40 minutes of intense work, rather than you go and add a slide, I'll just go and check I'll just go and just answer that quick ping, right, I'll just come back and do that. And you find it's taken 4 hours of bad attention, whereas it would have been 45 minutes of concentrated attention. So I think it's just knowing those things. It's also being aware that earlier in the day you do those things seems for most people to be more productive in getting them done.
Thanks for the great question. I have 3, for those of you and my team out there, I have 3 Post-it notes in front of me at all times, and it's got WOT, not WTF, WOT, what one thing. And I write down the one thing today, the one thing this week, and the one thing this month. Right. And that helps focus me and on the thing that matters. Another question.
Hi Bruce, thank you for coming in. I just bought your book.
Hey.
5 that you need now. Any tips around managing travel for work and the impact on well-being and your personal life?
You know, I've not spent a lot of time looking into the evidence of that, but I think the impact of it, I can feel myself. I've had about 6 weeks where I've been traveling very intensely, and you know, and it sounds by your question that you'll empathise that it can sort of be incredibly harsh and just on a sense of getting things done, but also your sleep patterns, which I think is probably the number one thing that impacts your mood. I've not done anything specifically on that. No, I mean, like more than anything.
Topic for the next book.
Yeah, honestly, or a podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it can be good thinking time, I find, if you're on plane a lot.
I was reading something yesterday about depression, and I was really interested in this. And like the number one thing that anyone can do to reduce their feeling of depression is to get a good night's sleep, and travel especially. So for example, on the scale, there's a depression scale of 0 to 51. Weird scale, but Prozac is regarded to achieve at best about a 1.8 shift on that. A good night's sleep achieves a 6-point scale shift on that. So it's one of these things that quite often, I'm not a depressive person, but quite often I can find myself thinking, right, I'm depressed, and very quickly I realise, no, you're exhausted. And it's sometimes, especially travel, can send that wrong signal to us, I think.
Go to sleep, yeah. I invested in one of these. It's an Aura ring. And it gives me lots of data on how
how does that work?
Well, it's a biometric readout, so it measures things like heart rate, body temperature, oxygen. Right, okay. And I don't work for the company. I have no vested interest in it, but it's pretty interesting. Just as a simple nudge. Last night you had X hours of sleep. It also tells you how much dream sleep you have and how much deep sleep.
Right, okay.
That's enough of an advertisement for auraring.com. Jehan.
Hi, Bruce. Jahan. My question would be, what should my ideal relationship or marriage with my phone look like?
Look, I think phones are a reality of modern life, and I think as long as you're clear about what you're trying to do with them, you know, I don't personally think that you should prevent yourself. I don't go to the extremes. So this Cal Newport guy, he's really clear. Cal Newport says, the digital minimalism guy, he says, if your use of the internet is just going on and liking people's photographs, he says it's all a mirage. You don't have a relationship with those people, and you're creating a mental burden for yourself to do it. So he's at the extreme end. He's like, get rid of things because you'll find that you enjoy life much more. So he's a big advocate, for example, of board games. He says what you get with board games, and you might have witnessed this, when you play board games with people, quite often it fills the room with just like a warmth, a connection. You feel like a real bond with people that hours scrolling through Instagram doesn't seem to give you. So we take incorrect signals. So he says try and reduce your social group to meaningful connections. So that was a distraction from me using my phone. I mean, look, you know, I probably use my phone too much personally, so I don't feel able to. I start every day with 2 hours of podcasts about American politics played at 1.8 speed. As a welcome into the world every morning, I can't recommend anything less. But such is the sense of peril that I feel that if I spend a day not listening to what happened in American politics, something bad's going to happen. I sort of feel like I'm babysitting American politics. As a pattern of behaviour, it's not a good one. But it consequently prevents me from lecturing anyone about how they should use their phone, I think.
Okay.
Fantastic.
And what about in the workplace in terms of like meetings and things like that? Do you guys have policies like no phone?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The culture of Uber is an interesting case study. And there was a woman who went in, Harvard business professor called Frances Fry, and she went into Uber to try and fix things. And she observed very quickly that the use of devices in meetings was causing multiple issues. It was causing multiple issues because people were using it as back channels to say things about each other. Have you seen what she's wearing? Have you seen have you seen the state of him? People were commenting like that, and it was creating a lack of psychological safety, that there was 2 conversations going on in the room, and in addition, people weren't paying attention. So they said, we're banning devices from rooms, to allow meetings to be faster and to reduce the amount of meetings. Obviously, we do our meetings on Google Docs, so that wouldn't be consistent. But there is something about the relationship there. I think saying to people, let's focus, but half the amount of time we spend in meetings seems to be a good focus.
Thanks for the question, Jahan. I mean, I think about this. You and I are both parents. You've got a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. Screen time, right? What's your view on that? I mean, we all as parents think about that and worry about it. How do you approach it?
I'm just so inspired by young people, so I'm not going to say anything about them. I think, if you think our generation, you and I, have witnessed ecological toll that's going to be centuries in the undoing, and loads of young people are taking to the streets and doing something about it. So while it's very easy to look at people's screen time and feel that it's wholly malign and it's bad, I'm sort of cautious. The one thing I will say is there was a piece of work out at Stanford last year that said that teenagers between the ages of 16 and 18 who had no moments of boredom, so no moments where they were off their phone, at the end of 2 years, they'd thought less about their own future and they'd thought less about their local community. So I think the illusion we sometimes have is that phones lead to us feeling more connected, and they don't necessarily. I'm just cautious to blame young people for anything.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and I think what's going on in the climate change is a great example of the positive influence of social network as a way of propagating an important message.
Shout out though, the amount of pensioners on that Extinction Rebellion. It's like 18-year-olds and 80-year-olds. I love it.
Yeah, we've got lots of time, I suppose. We're using the time well.
Too right though, good way to use it, rather than being down the golf club or whatever.
Absolutely. Bruce, I could talk all afternoon to you. I'd like to ask for a top tip to leave us with. If you boil up everything that you talk about in your podcast and your book, what would be the one tip that you leave us with today?
I think the illusion of busyness and the illusion of productivity is actually one of those causes of burnout. So, if we're all sitting there, symptoms of burnout are emotional exhaustion, where one of the ways you might see that is you go to bed wide awake, but you wake up exhausted. Or another one is depersonalization, where the people who are around you find way more annoying than they should be. I sat somewhere yesterday where a guy was making a phone call that I just wanted to I wanted to put his soup in his lap. That's not. But it's a sign of depersonalization. And the final one is a sense of fatigue, where things that used to be enjoyable for us aren't as much fun anymore. Right, they're the symptoms of burnout. And as soon as you start putting symptoms to it, people are like, oh yeah, I recognise some of that. Things that used to be fun, I just don't enjoy as much anymore. And I think it's a direct consequence of us thinking we need to be busy all the time, we need to be productive all the time, we are trying to cram too many things in, and it's an illusion. It's sort of misdirection, really. Yeah. So I'm a big advocate of people intentionally trying to do less but accomplish more, really.
It's great advice. Everything that you say, in fact, really resonates, and you have an ability to vocalize a lot of the things that we all think about. So thanks for being an inspiration and a thought leader on the topic. Bruce Daisley. Yep.